And now more than ever, it's time to challenge the status quo and set a new course for our party and for our province. And because of that, it's why we put forward a proposal for universal childcare here in Ontario. I also believe it's time that we had a basic income. What we've proposed is a basic income to implement it and start it right away. We had a study, a 4-year study in Manitoba, that showed an 8.5% decrease in hospital visits because of a basic income. My wife has worked in the emergency room in Toronto for the last 12, 13 years, and she tells me every day there is frequent flyers. There's people who come in because of their poverty, because of the fact that they can't afford a place to stay or a meal to have, and they use our healthcare system in order to make up for that. The poverty review that came out a few weeks ago talked about the cost of poverty in Ontario to the healthcare system alone was $4 billion. We can reinvest all that money to make sure we have a stronger, better healthcare system if we have a basic income here in Ontario. There are doctors already who are telling us that the number one thing, the prescription that they want for Ontario is a universal basic income, because of how much that costs the system and how much of a burden that is onto the system. So that's one thing that we need to start listening to them right away now. And we can't be afraid to put out bold solutions to this. What do we have to lose at this point? This is an argument that we need to make to people to say that we can deliver a better healthcare system if we're willing to invest in the right things. And we talk about what we're willing to do. We need to be willing to have that tax conversation. We need to be willing to have that conversation around how we can better deliver healthcare in this province and what it will cost people, because it will matter to people. And we used to talk all the time about $1 in health prevention leads to $4 savings at the end of the road in the healthcare system. That's what we need to keep talking about.
I'm a supporter of basic income. I was on the committee that implemented the plan, and I was the minister responsible for basic income for the pilot project at the tail end of our government. And the big question is that this is I believe Hugh Segal in his report said it was a $54 billion expenditure. So it is very difficult to implement a basic income, and even moving incrementally, it doesn't provide enough funding to make those changes you're talking about. So I guess my big question to Alvin would be, if that's okay, how do you actually make basic income work when even if you implemented it at 25% of the 54 billion, you can't find the cash, and that 25% won't have the impact that you're talking about? I am a big supporter, but I don't understand how we get there.
I will try to make this quick because it is a very robust proposal. But that number was about delivering it across Canada. The Ontario-specific number is $17 billion, but it would also roll in ODSP and Ontario Works. So the new and additional net cost would be between $5 and $7 billion, and that's not including any of the offsets in terms of the $33 billion reduction in cost of poverty on Ontario that would be included on that. Right? Like, we're talking an additional $4 billion that we can spend on healthcare in the healthcare system, an extra $1 billion that we can spend in the social justice system here in Ontario, because the cost of poverty is astronomical, and we want to make sure there are enough resources for people who actually need them in healthcare, and to not use the healthcare system to treat the symptoms of poverty here in this province.
Great, thank you, Alvin. As Ontario's economy has recovered from the Great Recession, the recovery has not been felt evenly across our province, either geographically or demographically. So the question is, how will you address issues of economic inequality in rural and small town in Ontario, in particular for women and youth in rural and small town economy?
I've been talking about a basic income, so I think this is where it's most relevant when we're talking about rural Ontario. And a basic income isn't just to fight poverty. That's actually, I think, a very significant byproduct. But more importantly, we need to be preparing for the economy of the future. And so I agree with Stephen. Our education system is the economic advantage that we have as a province, our talent, our people. But those jobs aren't there anymore. We're talking about millennials now, people under 40, who are going to have 3 to 5 careers over their lifetime, where 1 out of every 3 jobs is at risk of automation over the next 10 years. That's incredible. And in rural Ontario, that's more prevalent than everywhere else. Right? When we talk about self-driving cars going through our cities, there are self-driving tractors right now in all of our communities in rural Ontario that are doing the jobs that dozens of people used to do. And so what are we doing to prepare for that? And one of the reasons we've had the support of Hugh Segal and basic income advocates is that I don't think we need another pilot. I think we know that the problem is coming now, and that we have the solution now, and we know how to get there. And in order to support the people in rural Ontario, in order to fight poverty, we need to have a plan to develop a universal basic income in this province as a floor, an income floor that people can stand up on and create a foundation for our economy moving forward and to future-proof our economy moving forward. Thank you. Thank you, John. I want to talk about what Mitzi brought up in terms of automation and what we're doing to prepare our students, because we need to be focused on lifelong learning. School doesn't end when you get a degree or your diploma from high school. With the economy changing as rapidly as it is, we've been talking to CEOs and companies who've been automating this over and over and over again, and every job is now at risk that we're talking about not being fully prepared for that. So how do we address that? Well, the CEOs who are part of our basic income network are talking about how they're the ones that are finding ways to automate these jobs, and they're saying this is the solution in which we can get there. When I spent 4 years working at Sheridan College, we were working with Siemens and Ford to automate those jobs, and they're the ones who are coming on board right now working with our post-secondary institutions to prepare our students for that future.
Great.
We're talking about universal basic income that's supported by 75% of Canadians. So we need to not be afraid to take bold action, especially when we know it's the right thing to do and it's the right political thing to do. So I'm Alvin Tejo. I'm running for leader of the Ontario Liberal Party. Thank you, everyone, so much.
Great.